I'm going to tell you 3 things employers want to know. And I'm going to really focus on this because most people miss the number 2.
What if your next job interview felt clear, calm, and completely in your control? If you are a designer and if you have been looking for a job, you know how difficult it is to get that interview.
This is honestly the most difficult time I've seen in my career. There are so many people that are out of work, there are layoffs, there's uncertainty. So it's hard to get an interview. And so when you get an interview, you need to make the most out of it. You don't want to end up in an interview and afterwards say, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I had said that.
Today, you will learn exactly what interviews are really looking for and how to answer their questions with confidence. You will learn the 3 things every interviewer wants to know and how to avoid the mistakes that cost people the job.
We really want to help people understand what interviewers are really saying so you can actually answer the right question.
Let's welcome Laura Browne.
I've had people tell me, but Laura, I don't need to prepare. I need to just show up and be me and be authentic. And I agree with you need to be authentic and you need to be you. But the reason I want to talk about this is I want to help you to be prepared to be the best you can be. This information is taken from my new book, Interview Speak. And we initially called it Translating Interview Speak because my co-author and I decided what we really want to do is we really want to help people understand what interviewers are really saying so you can actually answer the right question, because they may say one thing and you may think that you're answering the question, but I'm going to show what they're really asking for. So we're going to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk about how to prepare for the interview, and then I'm going to talk about common questions, including the really scary question, which is what are your weaknesses? Because that's one that people really mess up all the time. And so I want to show you what a formula is for that instead. And then I'm going to talk about how to avoid mistakes. I've been in human resources for many, 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 many years. I don't even want to tell you how many years, including I was HR director at a global technology company for many years. And I've worked in a couple of global tech companies. And so I have been on the other side where I have interviewed people, but also in my early career, I totally messed up a bunch of interviews, and I'm going to tell you some stories about that. So I know what it's like when you don't realize what you need to do in an interview. And then since then, as a senior director at HR, I taught managers how to interview. So I know what the managers or the leaders are expecting that you're going to be talking to. Since then, I've written a couple of other books on how to make more money at work. I've written a book on how to deal with a layoff, help my company swipe left. I've written for Forbes. I've been a business coach for years. And today I'm here to help you have less stressful and more successful interviews. So let's just go ahead and jump in. When we think about interviews, what makes interview questions so hard? Well, first of all, this is a stressful situation where you only have half an hour or an hour, to get as much information as you possibly can. And also, each question has a real question behind it. And that's why I'm going to translate what the real question is so you can understand. In addition, there are no perfect answers. Now, I know that there are some books out there that say, here are the 100 best, interview answers. That's not true, because interviewers have heard all of those fake answers before. And if you start saying those fake answers, they're going to know it, and that's not going to go well. So instead, I want you to come up with your best answer. And that's why I'm going to give you this information. Also, during the interview, it can be hard to know how you're doing, because there are some interviewers that they plan to have a poker face or a straight face where they don't show any emotion because they think that's what they need to do. And so you might be thinking, oh, this is not going well, when actually you're doing really well. And I also know interviewers that are very, very friendly because they want to help you relax. And just because they're friendly and smiling doesn't mean you're doing a good job. So again, in the interview, it's so hard because you really are not getting the feedback that you need. But knowing that, that's why it's so important to prepare. Now, I'm going to tell you 3 things employers want to know. And I'm going to tell you why and what you need to do differently to stand out. So employers want to know, number 1, can you do the job? Well, obviously they've seen your resume and that's why you're in the interview. So they're thinking, chances are you can do the job. The number 2, and this is so key, they want to know, do you want to do this job? Now that seems pretty obvious because you're sitting in front of them having an interview, because they know you want a job and they know you want to get paid. But do you want this job? Does this job suit your interests, your motivations, your career goals? Are you going to be excited about this job? Are you interested in this job? Are you going to be motivated at this job? Or is this just another job, just another 9 to 5? So it's really important that you need to convince them that you want this particular job. And I'm going to keep coming back to that. And again, this is where most people miss. And if you don't convince them, number 1 and number 2, you're not even going to get to number 3, which typically happens a little later on in maybe a second interview, they're wondering, will you fit? Are you the kind of person, or do you have the kind of personality and work style that will be a match for our company, our department, our team, our customers? So you need to be able to convince people of all of that. And here's the key that, and I know we don't think about this, that interviewers are fearful. And interviewers are fearful that if they send you on to the manager, or if they offer you the job and you don't do well, like you're bored and you quit, it's going to look bad for them. So that's why it's so important that you convince them not only you can do the job, but you really want it and you're going to stay there and you're not going to leave and you're going to make them look good because they passed you on. So I want you to think about their fears, not just your fears. So how to prepare? Obviously, get to know the company. And I'm going to say some things that may be familiar with you, but I just like to reinforce it. So get to know the company, go to their website, go to social media. What are people writing about them? How do they describe their culture on leadership? Because you can use that wording in the interview to show that you're prepared. And why do you want to show you're prepared? Because that gets back to number 2. If you have taken the time to look them up and find out about the company, probably you're excited about this job. If it doesn't seem like you really know that much about the company, they're going to think, oh, okay, so this is just another interview. They don't care about this job. So that's another reason it's important. Get to know the interviewer. Look on their LinkedIn profile. Get to know the job. Analyze and develop possible questions. And I'm going to come back to this because the job description gives you clues as to what they might ask you. Also, know yourself. Part of preparation is identifying compelling stories. So you need to pull out a bunch of stories based on probable questions or common questions that you can use, that you can have in your back pocket and pull out and be ready. And then you want to prepare for common questions. And in the book, we have chapters on common questions that you're going to get. And I'm going to go through a couple of them. Now, people really find it helpful to use a framework because, again, how are you going to come up with this answer? And I'm going to tell you 3 frameworks that most interviewers are familiar with and most people use. The first one is called PAR, Problem, Action, Result. The second one is called STAR, and these are similar: situation, task that you were given, action, and result. We're going to dive into the third one a little bit more, SOAR, SOAR, situation, obstacle, action, and result. And again, I love this because when you're trying to prepare, this makes it easier for you to actually prepare an answer. Please know I am not saying that you should memorize these answers. Absolutely not. That's going to come off badly. But instead, you should just be prepared. And you might say it out loud. You might practice it a couple of times. You might even record yourself so that when they ask you the tough question, it rolls off your tongue and it's easy. Now, if we were to use the SOAR, situation, action, result, it might sound something like this. Situation: at my last company, there was a problem. There was a problem with X. Obstacle: it was a problem because of Y, and what was difficult was Z. The actions I took were A, B, and C. As a result of these actions, there was an increase in renewal rate. So you can see in a very clear, short way, using these frameworks can really help you to put this together. Now, the other thing I'm going to suggest, another framework, which is so helpful, is what we call the negative sandwich. And you want to use it when it's a tough or difficult or a negative answer. So again, what are your weaknesses? What failures have you had? Things like that. You've got to put something negative, but a lot of times what happens is people sort of go down a rabbit hole and they just keep talking about negative things. Absolutely not. What you need to do instead is sandwich a negative between 2 positives. So a positive: I'm really proud of my ability to do this. Negative: however, one time or in the past or in this situation, I did this or I do this. Positive: I've learned an important lesson and now what I do is this. And so again, it's really important. You have to mention the negative. Do it briefly, but then always end on a positive. So we're going to keep mentioning the negative sandwich. The other thing that get people caught up is I versus we. You need to get comfortable saying I, and you need to use both but be intentional. Because if you only say we, people are going to wonder, did you do any of this or was this just your team? So if it's something that you personally did, I gave a presentation, I conducted an analysis, use I. If you're going to say we, you might want to put the I in first. I led the team and together we accomplished this. I represented my department on the X team and we did this. But don't overuse either. If you only say I'm going to think you're not a team player. If you only say we, I'm going to wonder if you did anything on your own or you only lean on other people. So it's important for you to do both of them. So that's interview prep. Let me get into common questions and I'm going to tell you how to answer them. So the first one that normally comes up, this comes up in so many interviews, is tell me about yourself. And the translation is, I want to get to know you a little bit and give you an opportunity to share what you want me to know. Are there any red flags, reasons I should not hire you? Are you prepared? Again, do you want this job? And do you get to the point or ramble? Again, because this is such a basic question, you have to have an answer that you immediately say. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I messed this up early in my career. When somebody said, tell me about yourself, I thought, okay, I should go through my resume and say, well, I had a job here, I had a job here, I had a job here. Don't do that. Here's what you do instead. And this is going to sound funny. You should only take 30 to 60 seconds. Now, if the interviewer wants to know more information, they'll ask you. But I've heard people ramble on for 5 minutes about, what they did in college. I don't want to know that, all right? Or if I do, I'll ask you. Here's what you do. You thank them and you say something brief to build rapport. Now, sometimes you've already done that in the first minute or two. Maybe it's something that connects you to them, their company or job. So, for example, I might say, oh, I see that you're located in New York. I grew up in New York, and so they're just a quick, if you can. If you can't, just ignore that. Here's what you need to do. Name a few of your skills that relate to the position, and then describe 1 or 2 accomplishments you are especially proud of that directly relate to the position. And then tie it up in a bow and say why you're so interested in this company and in this specific position. So again, all you're doing is you're showing them you know what this position is, you're a great fit, you don't ramble, and this is a lot of green flags for them. Now, next question that comes up, why are you looking for a job? Translation, are there any red flags? Again, reasons I don't want to hire you, such as performance or personality issues. And here's the big one. Are you going to badmouth? Are you going to say nasty things about your last employer or manager? Because if you are, chances are then maybe you're a person that's unhappy or complains. And when you leave our job, you're going to complain about us. And I don't want that. So instead, use the negative sandwich. So positive. So you want to start out with a positive about either your current company, if you are already still employed, or maybe your last job. And so you might say something, I enjoyed the job, I enjoyed the people, I enjoyed the company, or maybe a feeling of pride of what you accomplished there. So again, start out positive. Then briefly get into negative. Give a business reason for leaving or looking to leave, like cost cutting or reorganization or merger. I mean, that's happening a lot. So when you just say, well, there's, some reorganizations going on, they just go, oh yeah. Or if none of that's happening, and maybe you're in the current job, maybe say based on the structure or the org chart, there's no room for future growth. So again, you don't say anything bad about anything. And then you end up with a positive. Say what you're looking for next. Show excitement and enthusiasm about this next chapter of your career. And then say what specifically excites you about this job and company, showing you've done your research. So again, positive, negative, positive. Now, here is probably one of the toughest questions. Another tough question is, what are your failures? But what are your weaknesses is a big one. And this is something you really need to spend some time on. And the translation is, are you going to be real and honest or candid? Or are you going to give a typical fake answer by discussing a strength as a weakness? And I will tell you, we've heard that a ton of times, and it is not good. Or are you somebody who has the confidence and humility to admit you're not perfect? And will we be able to work around your weaknesses in this job, or will they end up causing problems? I mean, if you're going for an accounting job and you say, I'm not good at detail, yeah, probably not going to get it. But in most cases, everybody has weaknesses and it can work out with different jobs. Now, here's what you don't say. Don't say nonsense like this. I work really, really hard and I get frustrated by other people that don't work as hard. Heard that plenty of times. That's not a weakness. Don't say that. I'm a perfectionist. This is the number one fake answer. Don't say that. Work-life balance. And if somebody says that, then I think, okay, so you used to work long hours and didn't have work-life balance, but then now at this job, you're going to want to leave early every day. Is that it? So don't say any of those things. It's not going to go well. Instead, how to answer. Now, listen to the question, because sometimes they say single greatest weakness or weaknesses, or occasionally I've even heard 1 or 3 weaknesses. Most of the time it's 1. There, you've got 2 options, and I'm going to give you examples for both of them. The first option is go back in time with something that you did not do well and focus on what you've done to improve. Or take a strength and explain specifically under what circumstance it can be a weakness, and then what do you do to compensate? Use the negative sandwich model and recognize what you're trying to do is sell your self-knowledge and show, because I know, that I am not perfect and I have learned and I have done things, then that makes me a better candidate. And this is also an opportunity to build rapport, because again, not everybody is perfect. Now, here's the example. So you go back in time using the negative sandwich. I'm really proud of my ability to do X, but that wasn't always the case. Early in my career, I really struggled when I faced with X, or I had a mentor or somebody who gave me feedback on X, showing I listened to feedback. And so what I did to work on this was this, and now what I do is this. So that's the past. Or you can start with a strength, but again, you have to admit that part of it's a weakness. I'm really proud of my ability to do X, but under this particular circumstance, blah, 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 that strength is actually a weakness, and here's why. So what I do in those situations is this. So again, you can see you can use this framework and make it easy. Now, there are other ways that they might ask this question. So sometimes I've heard, if I were to call your previous boss or colleagues, what would they tell me are your areas for improvement? That's a weakness question. Or what are you working on to improve yourself? Or this is a good one. If you were to hire a professional coach, what are 3 things you would want to work on with them? Again, that's telling weakness. All right. Another question that you get, and this is typically at the very end, is what questions do you have? And I remember somebody told me, oh, I never want to ask questions. That makes me look bad. Absolutely not. You have to ask questions. Again, asking questions makes you look prepared and interested. So they want to know what you're interested in learning about. And really what they're wondering is, do you care more about benefits and time off? Or are you so interested in this job or team and the company you have questions about them? And I will tell you right now, about 2 months ago, I talked to a manager. She was interviewing candidates for a position. She was a hiring manager. And I said, how'd it go? And she said, well, there was one. She was okay. But then when I said, what questions do you have? Her first question was, tell me about your time off policy. And she said, red flag immediately. She didn't get moved forward. Now, do you want to ask about vacation and stuff like that? Absolutely, but not in the first interview, because that tells the interviewer all you care about is time off. You need to ask that later on, especially after you get the offer, and then you can negotiate. What questions do you have? How do you answer it? Always have questions prepared to show your research and your interest in the job. Now, the questions should be tailored to the interviewer's role. So, for example, if I'm talking to somebody in HR recruiting, I might ask some general questions like, how would you describe the company culture? What are the common characteristics of people who are successful at this company? Or here is my favorite. What do you enjoy most about working here? And I talked to somebody who did this a couple of weeks ago, and she said, Laura, it was so fascinating because the HR person broke into a big smile and started saying how much she loved the company, and she felt it was a way to connect with the HR person. So that's a great question. For the hiring manager, you might ask, what will be my top priorities? What are successes that the team is proud of? Tell me about the customers I'd be interacting with and what their expectations would be. Basically, tell me about what I need to do to be really successful here. You could also focus on what you found out with your research. So you could say something like, I saw on your website, or I've seen in your posts, that you're going to be opening some offices in Europe. I've spent a lot of time in Europe and I'm very familiar with it. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So again, you're adding some more reasons why they should hire you. So always be ready with questions. Now, that's the common questions. Let's talk about some mistakes that you really need to avoid. Not being prepared. And obviously, I just keep saying that you need to be prepared. Obviously, do your homework. Don't think you can wing it. Be ready to answer the common questions. Now, here's an interesting one. If you have been a manager or if you've been involved in interviewing other people in the past, sometimes you think, I know how to do this. But don't assume just because you have interviewed other people, you're going to be a good interviewer, because every interviewer is different. Make sure you practice your answers to difficult questions and really say them out loud. Plan questions and get there early. You need to make sure that you plan, if you've got a 9 a.m. meeting, make sure that you're there by, quarter of. Be early. Another problem, not hearing the question. Now let the interviewer finish the question before you plan your answer. And sometimes interviewers have long questions and you hear the first part and you're like, okay, great. And then you're starting to, make an answer, but you need to make sure you hear the whole question because the question may change a little bit. Take a brief pause. And I know sometimes I get questions about that. You mean I'm allowed to pause? Absolutely. Especially if it's a weird question. Just pause for a moment. To you, it's going to feel like an hour. To them, it's going to feel like a couple of seconds. And then pick your best story. Don't ramble, because as you try to come up with an answer, that sounds horrible. Sometimes interviewers will interrupt you because you're going in the wrong direction. Like, hold on, what I actually want to know is, customer-facing issue. So if an interviewer interrupts you, see it as a gift, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to give you an opportunity to answer the right question and to hear what they're really looking for. So don't be upset about it. Oh, thank you. And then take a moment, regroup, and go ahead and answer the right question. Other mistakes, giving answers that sound good to you but are not. Too long or rambling or too short. I remember I was in an interview one time and I gave a short answer and she said, is there anything else? And I thought, oh, okay, I need some more information. Or focusing just on what you did instead of how you did it and why it mattered. Those two are key. How did you do it? Why it mattered? What was the result? Because again, they want to know your thought process. They want to know what actions you take. Also, not giving answers that relate to the job, company, or industry. So especially if you're trying to apply to a different industry, you need to make clear why the things you're talking about are connected to this industry. Otherwise, I'm going to say, oh, that person was just in banking. They're not going to get manufacturing. Don't expect them to connect the dots. You connect the dots. And then just giving general answers instead of specific past examples that you can explain the results of. The other thing is not using the job description to identify possible questions. So the job description is a gold mine of information. I'm just going to give you one example. So if the job description includes something like this, present a positive, professional, and high energy approach to clients and team members, then chances are, here are 2 questions that they could ask you. In what ways have you displayed a positive, professional, and high energy approach in your previous positions? Or they might ask you, give a personal example of displaying a positive, professional, and high energy approach when interacting with a customer or potential customers. So again, this will help you to think about all sorts of different questions. Now, at the end, don't forget to find out the next steps and time frame and close the sale. So at the end of the interview, you want to reinforce your interest and enthusiasm and briefly summarize why you're such a great fit. So you might say something, I'm really excited about this role. I feel I'm a great fit because of X, Y, and Z, as we've discussed. I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation in the next stage of your selection process. What are our next steps and timeframes? Smile and thank them for their time. And then don't forget to get the names and contact information if you can. Send thank you messages. Obviously, we're not sending, handwritten thank you notes anymore, but you should send them a message and say that you appreciate their time and reinforce that you're excited and a great fit for the role. And if there's something else you want to add, either reinforce what you said or say, and another example I want to give you, or something else that I didn't have a chance to say is this, go ahead and send it in the message, because again, that will remind them why you're the best fit. Again, my message is prepare, prepare, prepare. Preparation leads to less stressful and better interviews. But be prepared and be authentic. So be you, don't be me. Develop your best answers and continue learning. So I always say to people, even if it's a great interview or a not so great interview, afterwards, take a break, get a cup of coffee or whatever. Afterwards, say to yourself, what did I do well? And I know we're always really hard on ourselves. So I'm sure that there was something you did well. So what did I do well? And what could I do better next time? And so that way it really helps you to learn and prepare. And if you want some more information, go to careercoffeebreak.com and go to the books and courses tab. And I've got some classes on there on how to get a higher starting salary at a new job. So what do you do when you get the offer? Or if you want to stay at your job, how to get a raise. On the left side, that's a QR code for Interview Speak, what your interviewer really wants to know. You can get 40% off the book at the publisher's website by using the code InterviewHelp. And you can contact me. I've got my email address there. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Tell me that you saw me here. Thank you.
Oh, we are all human here, and we can have that time to process what is being requested, to ask more questions when we are not really sure of what they want.
I love that, Carla. I love that. And thank you so much. I hope you're leaving with some great ideas and some actions you can take.
I'm sure of that, Laura. It was amazing to have you here. Thank you so much again. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Looking forward to see you next time.
Thank you.